Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free now at linkedin.com/goodseats. That's linkedin.com/goodseats to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now, here's our show.
A stadium built for baseball just over a decade ago is being redeveloped for a sport often compared to America's pastime. Cricket is moving into the former Air Hogs Stadium in Grand Prairie, and not just at the level played by dozens of teams around North Texas, but Major League Cricket, and a home for international matches that could be watched not by millions, but billions.
That is a crazy, crazy number. And the flagship where we're going to be first, putting up our flag and announcing USA Cricket to the rest of the world is going to be right here in Grand Prairie.
Major League Cricket will expand the stadium over the next year, possibly to 10,000 seats, and add 2 more fields next door. City officials said they would aggressively market the sport, including starting youth leagues and building a local fan base.
We've got a lot of people who are from the countries that have supported cricket, that have moved into our region.
That was part of why the world's second most watched sport landed here, beating out Houston for a Texas location. The co-founder of the league said there are already 250,000 fans in the region.
The growth of cricket fans in Dallas has probably been the highest in the nation.
Turning all this into a cricket stadium is part of a plan to build more interest in the sport in the U.S. over the next 10 years. The Pro League is expected to start playing here in 2022. In Grand Prairie, Jason Allen, CBS 11 News.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, hello, welcome, my friends. It is yet another edition of Good Seats Still Available. Yes, our little weekly sojourn, if you will, into what used to be in professional sports. A topic this week that we have been long eager to get into. We have found an excuse, and we think it opens the door to a Pandora's box down the road of intrigue. It is the sport of cricket, which I know may generate the sound of crickets for some traditional North American sports fans. But I truly encourage you to stick with this episode this week. You will learn a lot, as I did. Our pal Steve Holroyd is back. The armchair amateur historian extraordinaire has moved his sights this year towards the sport of cricket, and not a minute too soon, frankly. It's a story that we've been trying to kind of dig into behind the scenes with some original players, if you will, behind the launch of the first real attempt of a professional league in this country for cricket. It happened back in 2004. It was called Pro Cricket. Great name. It lasted only a season, but it was a legit attempt to glom on to the new, at the time, exciting format of 2020 or T20 cricket, sort of a condensed and more modernized approach to the sometimes 4 or 5 day long test cricket or full day match approaches to the sport. That came about, that sort of 2020 or T20 version in I think it was 2003 or so, or 2002, 2003 or so, when that kind of formally got launched in a couple of different parts of the world, and now is frankly the most popular version of it professionally. Yeah, the test matches and all that kind of stuff still exist on the international front, but the pro league thing in New Zealand and Australia and India for sure. The Indian Premier League is just gigantically popular. It's NFL times 2, I think, if you want to sort of put it in American terms. The T20 format is exploded further, the popularity of the sport. And in 2004, you had an earnest attempt. It was in 8 different markets in the United States. You will be forgiven if you never saw it or heard about it, because it was barely covered by the, shall we call it, mainstream sports press. But Staten Island, New York had a franchise. The New Jersey Fire in Bridgewater, New Jersey had a franchise. D.C., actually, in Bowie, Maryland. The Florida Thunder in Homestead, Florida. Chicago, out in Schaumburg, Illinois, had a franchise. Kezar Stadium in San Francisco hosted a team called the San Francisco Freedom. L.A., or really San Bernardino, had a franchise. And yes, in Texas, in Houston, actually, at the University of Houston's Cougar Field, they also hosted a franchise. And it was 8 teams. It was covered on the Dish Network. We'll get into this story with Steve Holroyd in just a few moments as to what was good and, unfortunately, what brought it to its demise. Maybe a little too early and maybe ahead of its time, this pro cricket thing in 2004. And a fascinating table set for what is to come. And this is arguably why we're kind of getting into it now. For those who have not been paying attention, in 2023, the summer of next year, the launch of Major League Cricket, the sort of second real attempt. And if you've been following the story a little bit, and our little clip there at the outset of the show here gives you a little bit of semblance of what's going on. The money behind this Major League Cricket to debut next year is already working its wonders and already underway. There is a pretty robust minor league cricket system already in place with games and matches and teams and a grassroots effort, if you will. And interestingly, very similar to a sport that Steve and I have known for some time, that of soccer. And I'm going to borrow the phrase that Major League Soccer has been using, a cricket-specific stadium. Yeah, the first of its kind, really dedicated to this new league, is already underway. And that's a clip from KTVT television, CBS DFW, that the Dallas-Fort Worth CBS owned and operated station. Jason Allen with the story from November of 2020. He alludes to the league starting this year. Obviously, it's been pushed back to next year. But Air Hogs Stadium in Grand Prairie, Texas, of all places. Yeah, in suburban Dallas-Fort Worth. I think it's somewhat betwixt Dallas and Fort Worth, kind of closer to Arlington, actually. Is a converted or soon to be converted or in the midst of being converted minor league baseball stadium. And interestingly, pro cricket in 2004 largely was played in minor league baseball stadiums. So it's a very interesting sort of scenario there. And we all know how minor league baseball has been contracted by Major League Baseball. And perhaps there are some other minor league baseball stadiums that might also be intrigued by the idea of converting themselves into cricket-specific stadiums. But this is sort of being designed as, at least, or socialized as, perhaps sort of the national cricket stadium, at least to start, out there in the middle of the Metroplex there in Texas. We literally just saw a piece last week where Major League Cricket is actually putting some dollars and interest behind a plot of land in Santa Clara County, California, for a potential San Jose stadium and franchise. So keep an eye on this thing called Major League Cricket. Lord knows that the sport of cricket is gigantically popular around the world. And of course, like soccer in the mid-1960s, a quote-unquote foreign sport to the American sports psyche. But we all know what's happened to soccer. It's exploded in popularity here and the international game, as well as a domestic league finally. And lots of things have happened with that sport over the years. There are some parallels, as we'll get into our conversation with Steve in a few moments, to that evolution, and maybe some lessons some lessons to be learned and some things not to do to potentially get in the way of the new launch of Major League Cricket coming up next year. And this is what makes this conversation about pro cricket in 2004, the one-year wonder, all the more fascinating. Stick around. You're going to learn a ton about what's going on in the sport of cricket, and you may find it intriguing enough to follow it and maybe even take it in a little bit, as no doubt streaming of it comes and a team might come in your market. And it's a fascinating sport. I am not, I will tell you right away, if you're a cricket fan and know all the ins and outs of the sport, I am by no means an expert, but I am intrigued by it. And hence this conversation, which I think is very timely, and both in the past as we explore pro cricket in 2004 and the future, next year's Major League Cricket, with our pal Steve Holroyd coming up in a moment's time. You're going to enjoy this. It's fascinating, and it's part of our march towards completism. And nobody asked for it, but we're going for it, and we appreciate your sticking around for it. All right, a quick promo thing, and let's get in. We'll get on our way with our conversation. Let's shine some love towards the general direction of our pal Kevin Schultz in beautiful Florence, Kentucky. I think it's in the Cincinnati metro area, if I'm not mistaken. 3 great sites for you, all T-shirt driven, and with some extraordinary logos that you will not find in T-shirt form anywhere else. And we're talking about soccer and basketball and in ice hockey, especially in the minor leagues, and forgotten teams in those minor leagues, but also some pro leagues too. So let's go through them in order, shall we? VintageIceHockey.com. That's the place, of course, for great hockey gear. Lots of minor league hockey teams of yore and their logos in great T-shirt form, and lots of different versions of the T-shirts that you might like. You like the long sleeve, you like the short sleeve, you want to get a hood with it, whatever. VintageIceHockey.com. If you're into hoops, how about ReboundVintageHoops.com? ReboundVintageHoops.com. And again, more great pro, but also minor league pro stuff. Eastern Professional Basketball League stuff in there. You'll find CBA logos in there. One of a kind, and you can't find them anywhere else for whatever reasons. Maybe people have forgotten about these teams or logos, but they're all there at ReboundVintageHoops.com. And last but not least, if you're into soccer, and who isn't, frankly, these days, especially as the calendar turns and preseason comes up, and Major League Soccer starting in February, for God's sakes, already, really early this year because of the World Cup this coming winter. ExtraTimeVintage.com. ExtraTimeVintage.com. You want American Soccer League shirts? How about remember the old ASL? They're all there. There's some indoor stuff from the old CISL. There's some stuff from the National Professional Soccer League, the indoor version, etc. All AISA, that's there too for you at ExtraTimeVintage.com. And any of those sites, you will get 10% off when you get to using the early and often code Good Seats. Yeah, use that code Good Seats at any of those 3 sites, VintageHockey.com, ReboundVintageHoops.com, or ExtraTimeVintage.com, and enjoy, courtesy of us and our pal Kevin, 10% off all of your purchases. So check them all out. They're awesome, great vintage stuff at VintageIceHockey.com, ReboundVintageHoops.com, and ExtraTimeVintage.com. Thank you, Kevin, for your support of the show, and hopefully you will enjoy those shirts. And again, as we say, buy them early, buy them often, buy them for your friends, surprise your loved ones with multiple quantities, and we appreciate that for sure, and I know Kevin will too. All right, let's get into it. It's time for cricket. Let's get into some snappy patter, shall we, about the sport of cricket, both past, present, and what's coming up in the future. This is a really interesting subject, and I am pleased to present it to you. Here's our conversation we had with Steve just last week. Please, as always, enjoy. As we get into this, why don't you remind our audience what your day job is, and then let's get into this crazy cricket thing in particular. This 1 year wonder that has eluded us for some time, called pro cricket, and there's a lot of backstory before we get into 2004 and the coming and going of that. But your background is not in this world. You're about as armchair an historian as I am, I guess, but coming at it from a different professional lens.
Yes, I mean, for a living, I'm a labor lawyer in Philadelphia, representing unions. But you're right, like you, amateur historian, the phrase that's been used at some things I've spoken at for the Society for American Soccer History is public historian, which I guess means someone who's not a professor. I mean, I actually have a minor in American history to the extent that means anything, but it's because I don't have the PhD. I am merely a public historian. as opposed to all the good folks who get to call themselves doctor. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek because they're all great guys. I have no problem with that. But yeah, that's my title now. As you know, my background was primarily American soccer history, which I've been doing for probably over 25 years. But the good news, bad news is that some of the stuff I was doing along with Roger Alloway inspired a new generation of people to come in and get involved. And so, for want of a better way to phrase it, I felt there was no room anymore. There was this younger group doing more of an academic kind of job and things like that. So I've been shuffling off and getting involved in other sports history projects. Again, like you, as your show indicates, you like all these dead leagues. I've always been fascinated by them too. And a number have been underserved. So I was doing, and I still am, professional box lacrosse, which is through the crosscheck.com site that I do with Dave Coleman. In the past couple of years, I've been getting involved in minor league basketball prior to what's the G League now, which was largely the Continental Basketball Association and the Eastern Basketball League. And lately, I've been inspired in part because a new league is supposed to be on the horizon. I've been doing a dive into the history of cricket in the United States and its brief but nevertheless informative professional run earlier in the 2000s.
Yeah, and look, and by the way, if you're a new listener to this enterprise, feel free to dig into our archives. You'll see Steve Holroyd on a bunch of different episodes, a persistent member in our sort of yearly holiday specials where we kind of just recap stuff that we sort of learned about things and project and predict some things going forward, but also some dedicated conversations. There's a great one about the American Soccer League. We have a great conversation about lacrosse. I think a couple of them, one with Dave and I think you hinted at this back in December in our last group chat around cricket generally. And I think if I had this correct, you were kind of almost approaching it as this sounds like a movie we've seen or heard before based on some of the work you've done in other sports, like in particular soccer and having a couple of competing entities and international organizations blessing or not blessing certain things. It sounds like, if I remember correctly, that you're maybe framing this story that we're going to talk about cricket in the United States, maybe falling in the same kind of dynamic as soccer was finding itself in the mid 60s.
No, you're exactly right. In fact, I was going to at some point jokingly suggest that Major League Cricket should hire me after listening to this podcast. That's the league that's supposed to start up in 2023, because as I started getting into it, both the model that Major League Cricket says it wants to follow, and also some of the things that Pro Cricket, the league we're going to be talking about in a bit, some of the things they were relying upon, it could be pulled exactly out of the Major Pro Soccer 1967 to 1984 handbook. And as you indicate, I mean, you have problems with sanctioning from international bodies. You have a hugely international game that is pretty much invisible here, and featuring nearly zero American-born participation, and with an ownership group that thinks that the sizable immigrant community is going to come out and support the sport simply because they support it at home. And that all looks and sounds good. But as we know, that script has been filmed once before, to go with your movie metaphor, and the movie was a flop. So the saying goes, past is prologue. With all due respect, I mean, the people behind Major League Cricket would be well advised to look at how soccer struggled in its early days and how a lot of the things that these folks want to rely on, the same things that Pro Cricket in press statements were relying upon, participation levels and everything else, that doesn't float the boat. So while I think cricket's a marvelous game, I mean, I first got into it about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't profess to be an expert, but I watch it whenever I can. I get my annual Wisden almanacs and things like that. But so it's a great game, and it's got potential, just as soccer is a great game and had lots of potential. But how it looks like these folks want to sell it, again, is something we've seen before, and they should be cautious.
Yeah, and the origin of the sport, or at least the center of it, right, is clearly not from this country, right? We talked about this from many different angles, right? Baseball and American football, hockey to a lesser extent, at least being relatively close geographically. Basketball, certainly. Those are all largely, at least North American centered or originated sports. But like soccer, cricket is literally and figuratively a foreign sport and or concept. And the idea of how to colonize the United States, when cricket is by far the most passionately supported sport in gigantic places like India and even other places that lesser populated, it's a gigantically followed sport. But like soccer in the 1960s, even though there was a pretty rich vein of immigrant-centric legacy of soccer, it's clear that the imported version of the professional sport is not going to be taken very easily or lightly by the supposed fan base that is supposedly interested in it, right? They know that the highest level of the sport is being played in places like the West Indies or in India.
No, exactly. Again, it's the soccer problem all over again. Indeed, it's the same problem MLS is facing now. Cricket. Cricket's got deep roots here. It was played at Valley Forge by Washington's troops. Washington himself is said to have played at least one wicket, which was basically he had one turn at bat. And it was running alongside baseball through the mid 1800s until a number of factors. There's always that inherent American exceptionalism. Even though there are perfectly good games out there like association football and rugby and cricket, we nevertheless have to spin them off and turn them into baseball and American football and what have you. There was of all things, Irish immigration in the wake of the famine led to a lot of anti-English sentiment, which further turned people away from cricket. There's certain class elements. Cricket was an elitist upper class game, whereas baseball was, while initially played by gentlemen, was adopted more quickly by the masses. It was very popular during the Civil War because it required less field space, things like that. So, but at least like soccer, it's got roots here. Soccer managed to stay above the radar screen much more than cricket did. Cricket here in Philadelphia, where I'm at, we were then and remain now the cricket capital of the United States.
Yeah. Now let's stop there for a second. Explain that, because my understanding of the origin of cricket, it essentially emanated from mostly a British influence, in particular the Commonwealth of the Territories, where it's still very popular today, or the former British territories, including places like India, which itself was formerly under British control, right? Is the 1700s Philadelphia, birth of America, coming over from England, 13 colonies thing have something to do with its rooting in Philadelphia in the United States?
No, well, I think it was being played throughout in that New York to Philadelphia corridor. The sport remained very popular even after the Revolution. And I think that's because it was just a natural rivalry between the cities, as opposed to Boston was a little further out. But Philadelphia became the capital, I think, largely in 1833. Students at Haverford College established what's generally accepted as the first cricket club exclusively for Americans. It was like the first attempt at Americans to embrace the game, as opposed to the British folks who had come before and brought it with them. And while that club didn't last very long, it helped. It made the sport very popular in Philadelphia, and it led to a number of clubs being formed, including the Philadelphia Cricket Club, the Germantown and Young America Cricket Clubs. It was a big deal. And the Philadelphia cricket team in particular would go on tours. I mean, it just by luck of the draw, we became the capital. New York continued to have teams. There was a newspaper called the American Cricketer, which was published at least through World War I. They would have standings for leagues in Rhode Island and Connecticut and New Jersey and New York. And there was an intercity Halifax Cup. So it was still it still had enough popularity that these leagues were up and running, and it was sort of sitting alongside baseball. And indeed, I think it's recorded that the United States played in the first international cricket match, which against Canada, the St. George's Cricket Club out of New York, which gave us the Wright brothers, not the ones who flew, but the ones who helped codify baseball and form the Cincinnati Redlegs. In September of 1844, 10,000 people attended. It was a big enough deal. As late as 1855, the New York Times was still giving more inches of press to cricket than baseball, but baseball took over. And again, for all those various reasons, I think, and one important one, which is we're going to revisit today, is that in 1859, an English touring side came here, kind of like the way the Corinthians did in soccer, when they were evangelizing soccer in this country, sort of trying to bring it back. And the American cricket team absolutely annihilated every American team it faced in that tour in 1859. And I think it's been surmised that, again, a lot of Americans decided, or American sports people decided, we're never going to be good at this game. Let's play our own, which again is a very American approach to things. And that hasn't changed, and that continues to bedevil soccer. And I think it's going to bedevil any attempt at a professional cricket in this country now.
Is it too simplistic to say? I'm sure the answer is yes, but you look at the history of baseball and where it sort of emanated from. Is cricket? Is that the root of baseball? There was this sort of seemingly secondary game called Rounders, which I know baseball was sort of founded on, but they all sort of feel not unlike American football. If you go way back into the origins, right? Association football and or soccer and or rugby, right? There seems to be a lot of commonality amongst at least some of the basic components of these quote unquote sports.
Yeah, I think the cricket baseball connection isn't quite as direct as association football then spun into rugby as one group wanted to carry more than the other. And then that spun. I think rounders and cricket remain distinctly two different games. They were bat and ball games, but the times batters got to hit and the way bases. It was kind of, I don't know if it's like the Neanderthal Cro-Magnon.
Right.
They look alike, but they remain different thing. But for what it's worth, because as you know, the great myth was that baseball was invented out of whole cloth by Abner Doubleday in Cooperstown, New York in 1864, whatever it was. And we all know that's a myth now, but it was clear baseball is clearly based on rounders. Someone, if anyone wants to take the time, someone should go to YouTube and watch rounders. Interestingly, rounders is largely a girls' game in Great Britain now, but you look at it and you immediately recognize it. So you can see where baseball took a lot of its basic rules. But that said, it's funny, after baseball was, quote, invented, then the cross-pollination of cricket began to become more evident because the cricket clubs that were around at the time supported baseball. They thought it was an interesting diversion. They encouraged their players to go play the other game, and I think it was George Wright. There were two Wright brothers. There was Harry and George. One invented the box score, and one was involved with the Cincinnati Redlegs. They were both with the St. George's Cricket Club, and they both became baseball converts. And the I think it was George Wright was more of a manager. He started taking cricket fielding concepts as far as placement of fielders, and started applying that to the early baseball rules, and was refining baseball using cricket concepts. So interestingly, as opposed to like rugby and soccer, they sort of started out more common. Depending on where you played, one there might be more ball carrying hand with the hands than another, and then they sort of split apart. It's almost like cricket and rounders were separate, and then baseball's created, and then cricket starts getting involved with that, and while they remain separate, you start seeing more of a cricket influence after baseball was created as opposed to before.
All right, well, let's talk about cricket sort of now. And again, this is more of a primer, but I was in India about 5 years ago for work, and in the evenings when I had some downtime and stuff to watch on Indian television. I mean, the various channels available to me, it must have been 6 or 7 simultaneous channels of different cricket leagues going on, and it was mesmerizing. I do not claim to even have a basic understanding of the game. I have some elements of it, but the quickest analogy that came to my head was there was like sort of this almost baseball like robust sort of minor league system on all underneath this Premier League in India, and it's of course gigantically popular. It's a country of 1.2 billion and growing. And it is by far the most popular sport, even to the point of it being not unlike the NFL here in the United States, a driver of media rights, right? There's a streaming service called Hotstar that literally put its name on the map, not unlike DirecTV here in the United States with the NFL direct ticket package, by gaining access to the IPL, India's premier professional league, as the basic way to get on the media radar of Indian consumers. And it still bedevils Netflix and Amazon, who still can't compete with Hotstar because of it. But here, the question though is, can you give us a little bit of a background of the types of cricket? Because I think that's important as we wend our way into what this league is, because I think it's confusing to the uninitiated. I think a lot of people sort of see cricket as sort of like a 5-day long marathon thing that is just an antiquity to the past. But there's also been a lot of effort to kind of, shall we say, modernize or quicken the game over the years. And that's important for when we get into the United States and its forays into it.
No, you're exactly right. In fact, it is in fact those attempts to, I don't know if modernize is the word, but certainly to speed it up, the sport up, which is what has led to the boom it's experiencing now around the world. I mean, while it never really went away, as you point out, I mean, the traditional cricket that most people think of are the folks wearing the white sweaters and playing 5-day internationals that will end in a draw. When all said and done, wind up ending in a draw. That's the purest form of cricket, in that, there's no limit to the amount of times you'll face pitches. They're called balls. And I'm going to say up front, I tend to Americanize a lot of what is going on in cricket by using baseball terms so that the casual listener will sort of get a picture of what I'm talking about. So some people will be cringing as I'm calling them pitches as opposed to balls. But in any event, yeah, that's the all-day thing, and that's wonderful. And purists love it because the patience when you're up to bat, defending the wicket, staying up there for 5 hours at a time, inching out a century, scoring 100 runs by yourself. It's wonderful, but it doesn't sell. So over the years, you started seeing what they call one-day internationals and other forms of what they call limited overs, which is essentially a way of saying pitch counts. Where basically each team's only going to get to see X amount of strikes. It's the easiest way to Americanize. And the limited over version that really started to take off, because it allowed for matches to be completed in less than 4 hours, was what's called 2020. T20, often referred to as T20. And that's where each team is limited to 20 overs. Long story short, an over is 6 bowls, 6 pitches. So basically each team's going to get to see 120 strikes. If it's a ball, it's called a wide and you get a run. So it's not like someone's going to throw a shutout by just throwing 120 wild pitches, if you will. But that did two things. It not only sped up the game, but it opened up the game in that batsmen since teams knew they only had a limited number of attempts to get runs, you saw much more free swinging. Test cricket, the 5-day international cricket, that's people basically, you see them, they have the stick in front of the wicket, and they're basically doing what they can to keep the ball from hitting the wicket so they're not out. And if it winds up being a hit and they get a run, that's fine, but they're being very defensive. In T20, they're swinging for the fences, and what that sport basically becomes. The analogy I use, it's basically now it's a combination of the game home run derby we played as kids. If you cleared the fence, it was a home run. If it hit the fence, it was a triple. If it whatever, that's what they have with sixes. If they hit it over the fence, it's a 6. If they reach the boundary, it's 4 runs, and run the bases as they're running between the wickets. And taking NFL concepts, the uniforms got more colorful, and the crowds got louder. It was exciting. It was faster, and it was a perfect storm of opportunity because around the time they come up with a faster, more exciting to many version of the game was also at a time when television was more desperate than ever for live content, because that's the only content advertisers will pay top dollar for in the era of DVR. And as you point out with streaming services, well, okay, now you have these streaming services. Now, what content can we produce that other people don't have? And live sports, again, was something to turn to. And cricket being huge throughout the rest of the world, behind soccer, probably still ahead of baseball. If we're talking about team sports, probably still the second most popular team sport in the world, with huge demographic audiences, including, as you point out, India. The time was right, and lo and behold, it boomed. I mean, there's a T20, the IPL, the Indian Premier League, is a T20 league out of India. There's Super Smash and Big Bash in New Zealand and Australia. England's got a version, and it's proving to be very popular. It's bringing younger people back to the games. It's very telegenic because, again, you have home run. Again, forgive me, I'm using these terms. You have the sixes, the home runs, the big blasts leaving the yard. It's very telegenic, and I mean that's a very long answer, but that's really how they got there. They sped the game up, they shortened the game up, and again, use the soccer analogy. It's almost like outdoor soccer, indoor soccer.
Yeah, I was going to go there. I was going to go there, knowing that was going to be a thicket of intrigue to get out of. But I appreciate that analogy because, and again, to all of our Indian listeners or other countries who you might be listening, and I can't believe where people download and listen to this show. You're talking to two folks, one more intelligent than the other, and that person happens to be on the other line. About this sport and the dynamics of it, but it's hugely important, right? And my little India memories from a half decade ago. Yeah, make no mistake, television absolutely part of this mixture, and arguably going to be part of the mix to anything that comes to the United States now that's especially streaming has taken hold. You're talking about now a competition that doesn't necessarily last 3, 4, 5 days or even one whole day, but perhaps maybe 3 hours, maybe a little less, a little more, right? That's NFL football territory. That's arguably, with the full wraparound coverage, a soccer match territory or a basketball game with overtime, right? That's digestible. That's even less in length than, say, a typical NASCAR race, right? So it becomes much more attractive, much more accessible, I guess. And maybe that's a key word because it probably now broadens the audience appeal, not just internationally, but maybe to new markets such as, wait for it, the United States.
Right. And of course, and again, it's the soccer question all over again. I mean, while cricket largely disappeared after baseball took over, the turn of the 20th century, by the mid-1950s, you had Indian and West Indian immigration to the U.S., and cricket starts making a comeback. I think it was in 1961, the United States of America Cricket Association was formed. It started popping up again in the colleges, but again, being played by foreign students, exchange students or whatnot, bringing the game back. It wasn't something being played by Americans. But as you have I guess it's the actual term that's being used, is we have the continued browning of America, as I think ethnologists refer to it. The love of cricket is growing in this country. You're seeing it played more. I mean, here's something people are, you and I are about the same age. You remember, like in the 70s, you saw those asphalt municipal tennis courts going up with the tennis boom. And then when the tennis boom waned, people like you and me took it over for street hockey. Tore the nets down, turned them into street hockey rinks. And then as ice hockey became more available, more rinks got built, they were abandoned again. Now when you drive by those, you're just as likely to see, a mini cricket match being played. Again, by Indian and West Indian folks, but they will set up and they'll play cricket in those old tennis courts. Here in Philadelphia, I can go to one of the parks, and there's not much baseball being played, but on a nice day, it's set up and there's a cricket match going on. So it's becoming more visible. And then we get to the eternal American love of money. And sports are hugely profitable in this country. But, the days of being able to form a rival league, like, hey, football makes a lot of money, I'm going to do a football league. That's really gone because these leagues have been smart enough to expand and make sure they snuff out any competition before it starts. So what you saw in the 60s was, hey, well, all the big sports are taken. Let's bring in soccer. And of course, as your show has documented time and time again, people have tried everything. There's been box lacrosse. There's been world team tennis. There's been professional volleyball. There's some of the stuff you haven't gotten to yet. World team boxing, which lasted all of one day. I'd love to talk to you about that one day. We're headed by Morton Downey Jr. So it's not surprising that now that we're in the 21st century, TV's big. Your audience is not just limited to the city your team plays in, but it's a worldwide audience. That someone was going to decide, hey, maybe cricket is going to be the next big thing, and I want to get in on the ground floor. And that's certainly what was in mind. The folks who started pro cricket in 2004. Those were exactly the things they had in mind. And also tied in with TV content. Everything we're talking about was what fueled the first attempt at professional cricket in this country, modern attempt anyway, of professional cricket in this country in 2004.
All right, what's this? LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, these days, it can be hard to find and hire the right candidates for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs made it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. Holy mackerel. I added that part. Focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, and use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified. Then, use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/goodseats. That's linkedin.com/goodseats to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now, back to our conversation. All right. One key point that we forgot to mention here, and I think it's a good segue, is T20 didn't really come into existence until the early part of the aughts, right? So 2002, 2003, it kind of got its start, right? And in many respects, it was almost sort of like the launching pad for what you just described, the possibilities of a more telegenetic product, a more accessible and shorter and more packageable presentation of sport. And I think that's why it's important. And this is actually kind of new and kind of important from my perspective is that pro cricket, as we're going to talk about in 2004, right, is literally just on the heels of the creation of the of the 2020 version of the sport, the T20 version of the sport at all, right? So it's interesting that so quickly folks here were looking at trying to jump on this new bandwagon of a still relatively new version or flavor of this sport right out of the box. I just find it interesting. This is something that's not even 20 years old, this format.
Right. Yeah. I mean, while there had been limited over forms of cricket before, you're right. The T20 concept was jumped on, and they did a number of things to make it more offensive. There's a thing called the power play where you're limited where you can put your fielders to, again, sort of encourage run production. And it took off right away. I mean, it really, it hit the ground, and it was very popular. And right, in no time at all, people in this country saw, wow, this is really taking off. And maybe this is and again, right around the time when you start, the Indian community in particular, as well as the West Indian community, are becoming more prevalent, more mainstream, if you will. And the thought was, hey, this is a market we can tap into, give them a sport they grew up with and love. And now here's an exciting version of the sport. And again, even though that was before streaming, live content was still a thing. The folks here saw what was going on with the IPL and the Big Bash League and things like that, and said, yes, we need to get on this too. Let's get a foothold here in the United States.
All right. Well, let's talk about sort of the origins of this league known as pro cricket. It came and went in the calendar year of 2004. There's also a bit of a backdrop, though. There's a jockeying for oversight, I guess, of this league. Again, not unlike FIFA and soccer back in the 60s. I don't know how much you know about this, but it seems like the governing bodies, plural, of cricket, both on the international front and certainly on the U.S. domestic front, were kind of sort of in flux around this time, just as 2020 was coming into vogue.
Yeah, in fact, again, it's very much like what U.S. soccer faced in 1966 and 1967. You had the International Cricket Council, which, like FIFA, was a pretty well-established, governing body. But here in the United States, the United States of America Cricket Association was in chaos. I mean, I think it had been booted from the ICC a couple times. There were previous attempts to do like a Nations League of cricket, kind of like with the lacrosse tournaments, the international field lacrosse tournaments, where there's promotion and relegation among nations. And the U.S. would say they were fielding a team, didn't field a team. So the ICC was not thrilled with that federation, but it didn't actually go away. But again, any league would need the blessings of both. And so you had pro cricket come up. And again, like the soccer folks from 66, didn't quite understand why they needed anyone's permission. I have money. I can form a team. I can pay players. Why do I need your permission? So yeah, it started in chaos and it finished in chaos because cricket isn't that big here. No one was really minding the store, but now there's an opportunity to make money. The powers that be wanted to make sure it was done right. The people who wanted to invest in it didn't really want to play by any of the rules, and it wound up causing problems for pro cricket from the start.
So is that essentially saying that by not getting the blessing of the then USA CA, now seemingly been displaced by what is now known as USA Cricket, or from the ashes of that, that was part of their demise? Or do you think it really kind of didn't matter because there was really no pro cricket to be had at this point to even get that permission? I mean, was that arrogance or was that intelligence to kind of go that way?
No, it's hard to say. I mean, because it begs the question, if they had the top players in the world, would people still come? I mean, or would they still stayed away? I mean, as it is, the ICC ruled that because pro cricket was not organized by the US and the ACA, the contracted players to the ICC test nations couldn't be released to play. So a lot of the top players who might have been able to come over, again, you keep running back to pro soccer, like with the loan system in the 70s that saw, the George Bests of the world coming out, Trevor Francis, top players coming to play here, at least drawing crowds when they were in town, those players weren't available. So while it may not have been like full outlaw league status like soccer had to deal with in 67, the fact is the only players you were getting to play in pro cricket ultimately were those who were out of contract. So they were older, a little past their prime. And while there were some name players involved, again, largely Indian and West Indian, they weren't enough to move the needle. But then it goes back to a question we're going to revisit. Even if this was a world all-star team, even if it was the United Soccer Association of 67 done over again with Lancaster Lightning and the India Tiger, the Delhi Devils coming over and playing instead as the New York Bowlers or whatever, would crowds have come out or would they have still stayed away? Probably the latter. I don't know if it made a difference, but it certainly didn't help. The inability to be able to say, hey, we're bringing Shane Warner, the top Australian bowler, is going to come here and show you why he's the Nolan Ryan of cricket. That wasn't even an option because they didn't get the sanction.
Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember it, but you had to look for it, right? It wasn't sort of widely known. I'm sure it was socialized certainly in Indian expat communities. My understanding, too, was that it was tied up somehow with the anticipated launch of a dedicated Indian television network, Indian programming, I think called the Desi TV channel, or American Desi.
American Desi TV, yes. Now, while some games were televised on the Dish Network, and I think the final 6 minutes of the league's lone championship match is available on YouTube. There's no audio, and the video quality is awful. But while games were televised on the Dish Network, Dish TV network, I don't know if that was a TV deal or whether it was just they rented space. But right, the plan was to tie it into this Dish Network, another network, I guess, sort of a proto-streaming type of idea, and that network never got off the ground. So that was among the several problems they had. But this was a league that they were saying they expected 3,000 to 5,000 fans a game. Instead, they drew in the hundreds. And it's funny, like the commissioner was a gentleman named Kal Patel. And he was asked, why are you doing this? Why cricket now? And his answer was, it said, look, it's the sheer demographics and the need for this sport in the United States. There are like 30,000, I'm quoting him now, there are like 30,000 cricket players in the United States who are at a level of AAA baseball players. And then you have probably about 70,000 who do it recreationally. Our studies have shown that 7.5 million people in the U.S. watch cricket. Well, I've done some checking. Those numbers seem wildly inflated. As of 2006, I think there were only 6,000 people registered as playing cricket. But again, it's the soccer thing. Well, people are playing it, so they must watch. And I guess, if he was doing some puffery to encourage investment, look, he wouldn't be the first sports mogul to gild the lily a little bit. But, it wasn't even close. And again, the main, even with that quote, you can see he was relying on the immigrant communities to come out and support their game. And if he paid any attention to soccer, particularly when it tried to go major in the late 60s, as we've said a number of times, he would have known that doesn't happen. History has shown that immigrants love the game and will stay home. In the 60s, it was listening on shortwave. Today, it's just sit at home and dial up ESPN Plus. They will stay home and watch the teams they grow up with. They are not going to go trucking to go watch the New Jersey Fire play in a minor league baseball stadium in Bridgewater, New Jersey, with third tier level cricketers when they can watch top tier on television. Again, it's everything soccer's dealing with now. pro cricket had to deal with then, and they totally misread the tea leaves, and it was one and done.
Well, look, and I see. It seems to me that the ICC internationally ruling that the USACA, the then governing body in the U.S., was not having not officially sanctioned it. That was essentially a blacklist, right? Sort of preventing arguably the most recognizable cricket players for the community that knew who those players were prevented from taking part. I know there were some that, I don't want to say cross lines, but were either out of contract or whatever, but it's clear that they were denied some of the maybe top tier names that would have drawn, right. And maybe kind of, stoked the fire a little bit for, the initial season or two, right. To kind of get things sort of kindling and going, right. Where, they essentially shot themselves in the foot by not being able to get to those top talent to focus. Frankly, it would seem like almost like, I'm guessing not unlike a North American Soccer League summer vacation for players, if they were able to come over and play in the United States and kind of, spread the wealth and get some initial interest going, and not having that had to be a huge blow in the very early days.
Well, yeah, no doubt. I mean, clearly, if you're going to try to present a brand new product, you would want to be able to present the best product. And if you're relying on the immigrant community to at least be your first wave of fans and hopefully generate interest, right, you want to give them a reason to come out. And the inability to do that was indeed problematic. And cricket's a little different. It wasn't so much like the summer vacation model with soccer. In cricket, everyone's got a league. The seasons tend to be short. Everyone's got a league going on somewhere. The world's top players are playing for like 6 different teams. This month they're in New Zealand in Super Smash. Next month they'll be in Australia for Big Bash. Come March they'll be in the Indian Premier League. Come summer they'll be playing in the England County League. So, I mean, that's how they make their money. They just it's almost like the indoor-outdoor soccer thing here, except it's year-round and there's lots of different leagues. So, breaking ranks and coming here for 6 weeks in America might have been enjoyable, but if it was going to keep them from being able to play in all those other leagues, it was a non-starter. So, if they got sanctioning, if they got their ducks in a row, and it opened the door to be able to, I always go to like Shane Warner or Ricky Ponting, some of the big Australian stars, and I'm not overlooking the Indian players. The reality is I'm afraid to mispronounce their names, but clearly lots of gigantic players could have been made available from all the cricketing nations to really get this on the radar screen, and not getting the sanctioning was a real problem from the start.
Well, that's really interesting because if done right, that you could get, it's theory, and maybe this is where the newly planned Major League Cricket, supposedly starting up next year, can get serious and substantial enough to get on the, shall we call it, the international calendar, right? So to be part of that top tier talent, showcase, if you will, to being one of those 4 or 5 professional leagues that a player might want to have on their calendar each year.
No, that's correct. And what Major League Cricket is certainly doing right is that it is aligned with USA Cricket. I mean, it's lost in the shuffles. In 2009, there were not one but 2 other rumored attempts to try to start up another T20 Pro League.
One of which was called Major League Cricket, not to be confused with the new one.
Right. And the other one was called American Premier League. And one was aligned with New Zealand, and the other, but at the time, again, the United States of America Cricket Association was so bad that the ICC finally kicked it out in 2017. 2019, USA Cricket comes around. One of those, the American Premier League is kind of kicking around. I mean, it finally got around to, it was supposed to start in 2009, 2010, 2011, didn't happen. They finally did something in 2021, playing all their games out of Yogi Berra Stadium in Little Falls, New Jersey. But that wasn't meant to be a league in the traditional American sense. It was almost like a world tournament. They had teams labeled, Team Bengal, Team Pakistan, playing one another in like a tournament setting, and the winner took home, $200,000. So it's around, but it's not really, I don't think it's attempting to do what Major League Cricket wants to do. Now, Major League Cricket is closely aligned with USA Cricket, which gets you sanctioned. We'll see whether that's a problem if it gets successful. I mean, we all know how a lot of people complain about MLS's close relationship with U.S. soccer, but clearly with a startup league, it's absolutely necessary. And what Major League Cricket's doing, right, is that they're trying to establish a grassroots, and that last year they started minor league cricket, and when minor league cricket is running again this year, so that's got it's a 2017 league, so cricket's being played, and uniforms are being seen, and it's being a nice advertisement for the arrival of Major League Cricket in 2023, and this is a legitimate endeavor in the sense, and we talked about this on the December show. MLC was rumored they wanted to be in Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, the big cricket markets because I guess of the demographics. But then out of the blue is that Air Hogs Stadium in Grand Prairie, Texas, which is the home of the former Texas Air Hogs baseball team, has been leased and is being converted to a cricket-specific facility that's going to host a Dallas team. So while it may not be quite the same as a soccer-specific stadium, it's showing that MLC, they're not just going to be hermit crabs playing in renting stadiums like the early days of pro soccer here. They're trying to establish, an infrastructure. And hopefully that's a sign that they're in it for the long haul. I mean, pro cricket was supposed to have been funded for 3 years. It wouldn't be the first league that said it was funded for 3 years and then disappeared in one. The American Lacrosse League of '88 comes to mind, the first attempt at a pro outdoor league. Same thing. We're budgeted for 3 years. It was done in 6 weeks. Major League Cricket looks to be avoiding all that. So it's good that they're trying to generate interest. They're trying to establish, a foundation with minor league cricket, which is a great idea. And I've seen it, like in my travels, when my work takes me places, I'll go to various turnpike rest stops. And there was one time, there was a family in the back sort of stretching out on a nice summer day, and they all had Major League Cricket caps with the logo. It's worth pointing out it was an Indian family. Now, that's not a criticism, but again, it begs the question, is that going to be enough to sustain the league? Or is the league going to have to find ways to bring in the casual fan, the dreaded casual fan? Again, going back to soccer, I keep sound like a broken record, but there's so many similarities. How do you get the dreaded casual fan, which will call, the middle-aged white guy to come to games? And it's intriguing to think. I mean, I'm thinking, do you sign recently retired baseball players? Because the hand-eye coordination isn't so different that a baseball player couldn't hit a cricket ball. He's not going to be a star right away. Although there's a story, Babe Ruth went to England in his prime, and he tried out cricket. And initially he held the bat, the traditional, like when you see pictures of G.W. Grace, the bearded guy who's like the Babe Ruth of English cricket. He was holding it, and he couldn't do anything. Then he started holding it like a baseball bat and started crushing the ball into the stands. And then he found out how little cricket players got paid. He made a couple jokes. Interestingly, a lot of players hold the bat like that now, but I digress. But, will you sign a couple recently retired star pitchers, star hitters, and get them involved to at least pique the curiosity of the casual American fan to come out and watch the game and maybe learn something along the way? I don't know if that's on the radar screen. And of course, the problem with that is, with all due respect to the game, it's kind of cheapening the game, because these players won't be top cricket players. They would be tokens. They would be selling. It would be, I'm trying to think of I'll get too deep in the weeds if I start talking about the soccer league of 1894 that brought in baseball players. But it's the same concept. So you don't want to cheapen the quality of your product. But it's an intriguing question. How are you going to broaden the appeal of this game other than just immigrant communities? Because they're not. It's not. History has shown that's not going to be enough. It's simply not going to be enough. And I think that's there's probably the core audience, and then there's the adjacent audience, and then there's the sort of
casual / spectacle type audience, right? And that's a delicate balance in the early days. I want to get to Major League Cricket in a minute, but before we do that, I just want to sort of maybe put a little more topping on the pro cricket thing of 2004, because I think it's important. You mentioned this Air Hogs Stadium, which is in the Dallas Fort Worth suburb of Grand Prairie, Texas, and is essentially being rehabilitated from being a minor league baseball park into what will be I guess, state-of-the-art and perhaps even nationally centered locus, if you will, for the sport of cricket in the United States, and essentially kind of the crown jewel of this new Major League Cricket. But pro cricket in 2004, it's interesting. They utilized mostly minor league baseball stadiums, with the exception of San Francisco and Kezar Stadium, the historic Kezar Stadium. The first thing that comes to my ignorant mind is, aren't those footprints of baseball stadiums and minor league at that kind of too small for the girth and the width, if you will, of playing cricket?
Yeah, but that's not contrary to the spirit of T20. Because I think they wanted to encourage more sixes, again, home runs, if you will, more boundaries. Ground rule doubles, not really an analogy, but getting to the boundary, you get 4 runs. And of course, you worked with what you had. There are no cricket ovals in this country, at least not anymore. Or if there are, they don't have seats. That's not exactly true. Minor league cricket, like there's a team called the Philadelphians, and they're playing out at the Germantown Cricket Club or whatever. I mean, there's still some places still have traditional cricket clubs, but they don't have the stands. They don't have the infrastructure that pro sports want to see as far as being able to entertain an audience. So yeah, I mean, no, you're right. It was smaller, but again, since this wasn't Test cricket and they wanted more runs, it was almost like with indoor soccer. Indoor soccer started with goals, 4 feet tall. Let's make them 6 feet tall so it'd be easier to score, type of thing. So, no one really minded. I mean, the American version did a couple of other tweaks. They had a designated hitter. Traditionally, there's 11 cricketers on a field, and all of them hit and all of them field. Pro cricket went with this 12th designated hitter. So it was someone who would hit but didn't have to field. That's used in some forms of domestic A-list cricket competitions, again, because the traditional 5-day Test cricket is slow, and while there's a certain charm to that, the powers that be realized that wasn't really selling things. They also, with the bowlers in T20 are usually limited to you have 5, so they're limited to 4 overs each. Again, basically 24 pitches each. In order to speed the game up, pro cricket, they had 5 bowls to an over instead of 6, and the bowlers could do 5 overs instead of 4. Again, just to sort of speed things up. So it was a necessary evil, but it didn't do damage to what they wanted to do, which was present the high flying, exciting, big bash version of the sport.
Right, which was just in essence still just getting underway and sort of gaining a toehold internationally. All right, one last question on that, though. What about the markets? So there were 8 teams part of this pro cricket endeavor in 2004. Some interesting geography. You had the New York Storm in Staten Island, of all places. The New Jersey Fire in Bridgewater, not necessarily a gigantic urban hub. D.C., the D.C. Forward in Bowie, Maryland. The Florida Thunder in Homestead, Florida, right, which is way south of Miami. And then in the west, you had Chicago in way western suburban Chicago in Schaumburg. The San Francisco Freedom were probably the closest thing to being in a major metropolitan area, that being in Kezar Stadium. The LA Unity played in San Bernardino, which is by no means Los Angeles. And maybe Texas, the Arrowheads, 2 words, in Houston, did play at Cougar Field in University of Houston, which is, right? So just right off the bat there, no pun, 2 of the 8 markets, if you will, or 2 of the 8 places where they're playing are not even in, I don't know, the major urban sort of areas, perhaps where, or was it kind of like, let's just find places to play and we'll promote the hell out of it and hope people will travel to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we've seen in lots of sports, again, going back to soccer, where the teams label themselves a big city and they're actually playing nowhere near it. And that's for TV. You're not going to get big TV money focusing on the Staten Island, wicket keepers and the Bridgewater or whatever. So you give them, so you name them after big cities. It was also practical. I mean, a startup league doesn't want to pay, assuming Yankee Stadium is available to be rent. Because again, you're going to be having the pitch, which is where the ball gets bowled in the middle of the field, and it's dirt and everything else. You're going to do real damage to the baseball diamond. Even assuming that was available, you're spending $100,000 to rent a facility, and even with their wildly optimistic estimates, you're only looking at 5,000 people coming in. So I think it was just very practical. I mean, minor league baseball stadiums were happy to rent it out. Again, we see it with this American Premier League. I mean, Yogi Berra Stadium, come on in. Yeah, you can stage your cricket here. It's a revenue stream for these small parks. And so it helped both sides. I mean, it was a revenue stream for the minor league team, and it was an affordable location that was a big enough piece of ground that you could stage cricket, even if it wasn't optimal as far as size-wise. But again, they wanted runs. So if home runs, again, forgive me because I keep using that term, but if sixes came more cheaply, all the better, because now you had more runs and it was an exciting product, even if it wasn't necessarily good cricket.
Well, we'd love to get Cal Patel. We've reached out to him on a couple of different occasions, and maybe perhaps this episode and some of your work might cajole him to finally come out and sort of tell the story. I'm sure it wasn't sort of all roses and butterflies, probably far from it. But I'm sure there was a lot of optimism and hope and perhaps maybe some opinions about what now seems to be sort of like the second coming of cricket in the United States. And as you've alluded to, Major League Cricket, the new version, if you will, or the newly named such, not to be confused with the previous Major League Cricket version, seems to be doing the things that are maybe not so sexy and perhaps away from the public spotlight, but maybe kind of put it in position to at least have a decent head start. Couple of things. Number one, I literally just looked at Major League Cricket's website just yesterday and noticed there's an interesting new development with regards to stadia pursuits, right? So you mentioned Air Hog Stadium in suburban Dallas. There's apparently some land that Major League Cricket has been associated with now in Santa Clara County in the southern part of the Bay Area. I think it's a 14-acre parcel that looks like it's somehow being brought into this mixture, maybe with the promise of a team and that kind of stuff. So I guess here's the question. What do you think Major League Cricket needs to do differently and or similarly to make a decent go at it this time coming up, we think, next year? Is it real estate? Is it a commitment to a stadium? Is that premature? Is it TV? Is it getting the brightest stars from these international leagues? What do you think?
Well, it's probably all of the above. I mean, I think what Major League Cricket is doing right is that they're being patient. Again, we're looking at like a 2-year startup. I mean, they rolled out minor league cricket last year. Minor league cricket's playing this year. They're not. And by the way,
this is all single entity, I believe, right?
Right. Well, no. It's an interesting point. Major League Cricket is single entity. The minor leagues are franchise. The minor league cricket are franchises. Whether that's teeing up, whisper it quietly, a perhaps promotion and relegation system in the future, I'm not sure. But Major League Cricket, capital MLC, is single entity, but small MLC is franchises, which is an interesting approach. But again, they're not rushing to race out Major League Cricket. In a way, almost wish they did this summer, because there may be a real vacuum as far as bat and ball games with the continuing Major League Baseball lockout. But hey, take your time. That's fine. but they've probably learned some lessons from pro soccer, and that they realized if you're going to be successful, at some point, you've got to own your own real estate. So, as opposed to Major League Soccer, where while the original design for that league, it said they should all be playing in their own stadiums, but at the time, all you could do to get money from people to run a team. It took a good 10 years before they finally started implementing that. Major League Cricket's in a position saying, hey, look, we're white hot in the sense that, again, as we've discussed, people want live sports product. People see, we're not a niche thing like lacrosse or roller derby or arena rugby or something like that. This is cricket, the second largest team sport as far as popularity in the world, and that can potentially tap into huge television markets like India. So if people are willing to give us money, let's take that money now and build the infrastructure. Because the way cricket works, the players will be available. The players are going to be looking for another payday. As long as you're not setting up your league in a time that competes with the other leagues and hopefully isn't running into their best players to their international red ball obligations, to test cricket obligations, they'll come here and play. It's not like you're bidding like the way the North American Soccer League had to. It's not like you're bidding against the rest, or MLS can't now. It's not like you're bidding against the rest of the world to get them here. If you get a niche in the calendar, and the other leagues are all short leagues. They're only running like the New Zealand league's wrapping up. They play 10 games, 10 weeks. So they're not long seasons. You find your spot, you'll be able to get the best players to come here. That'll take care of itself. You're still writing a check, but at least you're not bidding against someone driving up the costs, So no, I think focusing on infrastructure is brilliant, because if you're going to make it, you're going to need your own stadium. So why limp in to the less than optimal minor league stadium experience? Although I guess there's going to be some of that. They're not going to have 8 stadiums by the time they open up. There's going to be some of that, but at least, again, like MLS did with Columbus and then Dallas and then Carson, if you show everyone else, here's the goal, and they see the goal works. If the Dallas franchise is drawing 8,000 a game, whereas the New York franchise playing out of the Brooklyn Cyclone Stadium, say, is only drawing 2, it's going to motivate investment into more infrastructure, which is only going to buoy the league up. And of course, once you've invested in that infrastructure, frankly, it's harder to quit. If I'm only renting a stadium, it's easier to fold my franchise and take the tax loss. If I now own land that's got a stadium on it, that's only going to have any use if I use it, well, now I'm sort of more committed to keeping this thing going. So I think they're making a lot of the right steps early on. And I'm not just picking on pro cricket when I say that. I could say, and you can draw on the same experience, we can look at a lot of pro sports leagues that have come and gone over the years, and you see the same mistakes always get made. It really looks like pro cricket by being patient. Major League Cricket, by being patient, by emphasizing infrastructure and everything else, by working with the worldwide body instead of fighting against it, is really teeing itself up for success.
Well, look, and also from a financial perspective too, right? I think we're also in an era now where, and we'll see how long this lasts as we record this in January of 2022. I think the days of easy money over the last decade plus, and interest rates being near zero, and perhaps maybe fueling, like a lot of other assets, the pro sports world, which, in the world of crypto and gambling and sports franchise consolidation and, multiple team ownerships and private equity getting into leagues now. I think there's going to be a course correction a bit. But that said, you got to also give Major League Cricket some credit. I mean, they have amassed a limited partner constellation of investors, that are, largely from realms of investment banking and venture capital. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, is part of that group. Ross Perot Jr. is part of this group. The chairman and CEO of Adobe is part of this group. So there are some names, and a lot of these names happen to have of Indian descent, right? So there's certainly a lot of that, let's call it insiders' knowledge and belief that the sport is just raring to go and is probably an underserved opportunity that could come to the United States if, to your point, the right things are done. And maybe that is some conscious thoughts about development of stadia and related real estate. I'm certain that television and video and streaming is going to be a big part of it.
Well, I was about to say, the one thing that Major League Cricket has going for it that the early attempts at major American professional soccer did, is that while I think there's still a real concern about, whether the demographic you're relying upon to at least first fill your stadiums are really going to be all that interested, the fact is I think now it's not as important because so much of this is driven by TV, the need for live content, and from what I've seen, what I've read, one reason why Major League Cricket is pretty optimistic, and why you're seeing the investors, like some of the names you mentioned, was that there's a possibility it'll wind up making money even if people aren't really watching it here, because folks in India, they want more live cricket content, and so if they're staying up at night to watch the American League, again featuring a lot of their favorite players, there's going to be heavy bidding for those TV rights. So as opposed to what when we go back to early NASL, there was only 3 networks, and other than pro football, there wasn't a lot of money in pro sports. Lots of different things. Now, of course, pro sports are at a premium. There's plenty of networks, and there's a worldwide audience. So the TV element and the streaming element and the video element may be just the type of thing that's going to bankroll the startup nature of things as they wait for an audience to grow and come to it. Because I do think, again, American exceptionalism notwithstanding, sort of like you finally saw with soccer. I mean, the sport is great. And once people finally get the opportunity to see it, and again, as opposed to when we were growing up, when the only soccer on TV was Soccer Made Germany on Saturday afternoons, now if someone's curious about cricket, they can find it. If there's early years of low attendances, because the so-called casual fans not buying, and the demographic they're relying upon is staying away because they'd rather stay home and watch IPL matches. But if the TV money is able to keep it going to where, hey, well, I've watched cricket on TV, I think I'll go down to the old Hog Stadium and watch a game. It'll get the chance to grow. In a way, I keep going back to soccer because it's going to turn people off. But again, it's a great analogy. In a way, some wound up floating MLS for many years. Packaging the TV rights to the World Cup gave it an influx of cash that allowed it to stay alive. I mean, it's a little told story. The league literally had the bankruptcy papers ready to be filed in 2002, and then it backed off. But the TV money was what kept it going, was allowed investment in infrastructure, which is what allowed ultimately signing David Beckham, and boom, you had the boom we have now. So TV is going to be very important, and there is a huge worldwide audience for it. So again, I like a lot of the things Major League Cricket's doing, and it allows me to be optimistic in a way that say one is not over say the USFL.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I am intrigued. There's no doubt. And Willow TV, which to cricket fans here in the United States is a subscription cable channel, but also a streaming service. And look, we're also now in an era of streaming services, which are, not surprisingly recognizing that live sports needs to be part of their arsenal. So whatever live sports looks like in the next 5 or 10 years, right? I would make the argument that it might not be traditionally delivered via cable or satellite service. It might be a renewed version of over the air. It's certainly going to be found in streaming environments. And to your point earlier, it's everything is available, right? And so may 1,000 niches sort of bloom. Well, those niches can be substantial, right? They could be in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. The lower economics of streaming could make for a successful ad and or subscription type of service. And look, as we're seeing now with some of these other, I won't call them lesser known sports, but lesser publicized sports, at least in the United States, in some respects, all you might need is a Netflix miniseries devoted to behind the scenes of, like they're doing with Formula One. And that sort of got a lot of people interested in Formula One in the United States, was that sort of documentary series that dropped on Netflix last year, right? So it doesn't take much, frankly, to start to, if you will, generate some curiosity by, in this case, maybe the founding and the running of a new cricket league. So, stranger things have happened, and maybe handball will be next, but let's get this one out there. Where can people follow you, Steve, and your cricket endeavors specifically, and then generally for the other sports that tickle your fancy once in a while?
Yeah, I'll lead with an apology. I didn't realize until too late that Twitter had a list function that would allow me to segregate my various interests. So instead, I kept setting up different accounts for my various interests. So the cricket account is at Yankee Cricketer. My basketball stuff is at In the Low Post. My soccer stuff is at Soccer Maven, MAVN. My lacrosse stuff is at Lax Maven, also MAVN. There's Crosscheck, that's cross with an E.com for the lacrosse history stuff. I have a YouTube page, Only the Ball Was Brown, which has a lot of old, and recently colorized. I've taken to colorizing a lot of old 1940s, 1950s, 1960s pro and college basketball footage. I have a podcast, Only the Ball Was Brown, that talks about early pro basketball, 1920s, 1930s, the very early days of the game. And the name, for people who don't get it, it's a riff on Robert Peterson's great book on Negro League Baseball, Only the Ball Was White. It's not, a MAGA-esque pining for the good old days. So don't be put off by the name. Just enjoy the content. I think that's it. I don't think I have a hockey account, but I don't do anything with it, so I'm not going to mention it. But,
all right.
But yeah, I think that's all.
All right. Well, last question, and more from an historian's perspective, right? So we did mention at the top of the show that pro cricket in 2004 did indeed have telecasts, albeit on, I don't know if it was pay-per-view or some dedicated channel on Dish Network.
Whether it was pay-per-view, I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
Any leads on possibly getting any of that footage?
Not yet. Again, I found over the years a number of good archival film sites. Not yet. I think because of the Dish stuff, and I guess initially people, I don't know, if VHS didn't operate with Dish or it was too complicated. It doesn't seem likely. Indeed, the footage that's out there looks like someone filmed it with his phone, filmed the TV screen with his phone. But the hope is that podcasts like this episode, or wherever I wind up posting any subsequent research about this league, or with the run up to Major League Cricket, with people asking, "Hey, wait, this was tried before." Maybe that'll start to pop up. I'm trying to find the stats, and it's frustrating because the Pro Cricket's old website is accessible through the Internet Wayback Machine, but the problem with that is that that doesn't always capture the links within the page. So I have the complete schedule, and I can tell you it got no newspaper coverage. I mean, at least not on anything that newspapers.com is carrying. But the webpage, there's a link for, box score. Oh, okay, I'm going to hit that and just download it. No, you hit that and it's dead. So, hopefully, maybe, as you say, after having heard this episode, maybe Mr. Patel will want to talk about it. Again, I can appreciate that he lost a lot of money and may not feel overly obligated to help Major League Cricket by sort of publicizing it. But if Major League Cricket gets successful, he should want to be remembered. It's like, if you will, like the Dennis Murphy of the sport. And hopefully he's got some stuff and he can share it with us. And because cricket, like baseball, has a lot of cool stats. So it'd be nice to get the stats out there so people could see, these are what great players do. Here's what their run averages are like. Here's how you can tell who's good and who's not, and have some fun with it. And it'd be nice to get the first attempt at pro cricket here in the mix.
All right, you San Francisco Freedom fans, you Chicago Tornadoes aficionados, you fanatics of the Texas Arrowheads, and all the other teams that were part of pro cricket in 2004. This episode was and is for you. Hopefully we can find Cal Patel and maybe some of the other folks that were involved in the launch of pro cricket in 2004. I think it's interesting, especially now that the new league is going to be up and running very soon next year, Major League Cricket. In many respects, you could already start to give Cal and his friends some credit for arguably being a little too early, but still foundationally being very important in the ongoing story of cricket in the United States on the professional level. It's fascinating. We're going to keep an eye on it for sure, and we encourage you to do the same. If you want to follow Steve's historical exploits into cricket and the United States and their conjoined histories, you can follow him on Twitter at Yankee Cricketer, Cricketer, at Yankee Cricketer. That's the specific place where he does all of his findings on the sport of cricket. Of course, though, you can follow him on his other Twitter feeds for his other sports history exploits. At In the Low Post on Twitter is his place for all things historically basketball. At Soccer Maven, M-A-V-N, no E, for stuff in the realm of soccer. And at Lax Maven, M-A-V-N, no E, for his missives and discoveries in the sport of lacrosse. Let's see. Our thanks to, of course, our pal Jerry Payne. I don't have a Twitter feed handle for him, but hopefully he'll get on that, and we'll have a place to follow him too. But until then, you can just keep him in your thoughts, and and ensure his good health to continue to twiddle knobs for us as he does so elegantly for the last number of years. Jerry Payne, Audio Excellence. Thank you, kind sir, for your efforts this week, as always. And thank you, great listeners. We appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with us this week, and hopefully some fun stuff for you next week. More great stuff ahead this year, for sure. Lots of great stuff coming up as the year rolls on, and we encourage you to stick around, put us in your feed. Don't forget to visit us at goodseatsstillavailable.com. That's where all of our old episodes are, of course. And if you want to send us email, it's hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And follow us on Twitter, of course, at goodseatsstill. You'll find us on Instagram, too, and Facebook. You'll find us. Just, do whatever. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.